In this video, I'm going to talk about iostream and using namespace std. So let's start with iostream. What is iostream? Iostream, this is iostream, and it's called a header file. And why is it called a header file? Because it has to come on top of the program. And why do we use it? We include iostream in the program whenever we want to use cout, cin, and other objects. And iostream has definitions of these objects like cout and cin. If we run this program, it's going to run successfully. Let me comment this include iostream line out. And what happens when we run the program? As you can see, compiler is complaining. It doesn't know what cout is. And here it is, error, cout was not declared in the scope, meaning compiler doesn't know what cout is. And iostream has a definition of these objects like cout and cin. To better understand what iostream is, let me give you a small example. Imagine you are a university lecturer and you have to take attendance of the class, and you'll be given the list of the students with their IDs, and these IDs define students. They are these IDs are proof that they are really students of this university. So meaning you don't have to go to academic division and check whether the students are really students of this university. So student names and their IDs show that the students really exist and they are part of this university. Likewise, iostream has definitions of these objects like cout and cin, and these definitions show that they do really exist and they are part of the iostream. Now let's talk about include. Include is a preprocessor directive and it's command to the preprocessor, which runs before the compiler, and it causes the content of another file to be inserted into the program. So imagine you are writing a program and you are using cout, but the compiler doesn't know what cout is, and it means first you must write the code that defines what cout is, but it's extremely time consuming. And another way would be to cut and paste the code that defines cout for each program you are using cout. But again, it would be cumbersome and tiring and time consuming. So people who invented this programming language came up with an idea of preprocessor directive. Its job is to insert the definitions of the objects like cout and cin into the program. So the compiler doesn't see this include directive. Instead, it's going to see the definition that was inserted by the preprocessor, as if the programmer had typed it there. And if you notice, this line doesn't end with semicolon, although sometimes compiler doesn't complain about the semicolon after the header file, but it's not correct to add semicolon in the end of the header file, because it's not a statement, and a statement is what, and it's an instruction to the computer to do something, such as printing out something or adding two numbers and something like that. So let's repeat. So what is iostream file? It's a header file. Why is it called header file? Because it must be included on top of the program. And what is it for? It contains the definitions that inserts the names and types of the objects. Without these definitions, the compiler won't recognize the objects. And now I'm going to talk about using namespace std. Using this directive we know already, so I'm going to explain what namespace is. This feature is added to C++, but we cannot find this in C. And let me give you an example for you to better understand. You can imagine namespace like a drawer in the filing cabinet. Why do we use filing cabinet? We use filing cabinet to organize documents so that we can find them easily and quickly. So let's say we have one student whose name is Ahmed, who started studying computer engineering in 2020. And there is another student whose name is Ahmed, who started civil engineering in 2018. And let's say there is one more Ahmed and he is a lecturer. So if I want to find and use the documents of Ahmed who's studying computer science in 2020, I go to the drawer with the label Computer Engineering 2020. So the purpose of namespace is similar with the purpose of drawers of a filing cabinet. There are lots of variables and functions and objects, and they must have names. And C++ uses namespaces to organize them. Just like we use drawers to organize our documents, C++ uses namespaces to organize them. The functions and the variables and the objects. So just like it's totally normal to have many students with the same name, and we put their documents to their own drawers, and in C++ it's totally normal to have more than one function or object with the same name, and we put them into their own namespaces. Why? To prevent name collision. So the purpose of namespaces is to avoid name conflicts. So in the future, we are going to create variables, objects, and functions, and you have to give them names. And let's say you create a function which calculates the volume of a sphere, and you give for that function name volume. So this function's name is volume. And let's say after some time you create another function that controls the volume of an audio, and you name this function volume. So now you have two functions with the same name. And let's say you want to calculate the volume of a sphere and call function volume. Compiler will not understand which volume you are calling and gives you an error. So therefore, we are using namespaces. The function volume, which calculates the volume of a sphere, you can put to physics namespace. And the function that controls the volume of an audio into audio namespace. So whenever you want to use function to calculate volume of a sphere, you should write using namespace physics. So this function is in physics namespace. But if you want to use the function that controls the volume of an audio, then you should write the following, using namespace audio. Just like this namespaces, there is namespace std. And std stands for standard, and it keeps the declaration of lots of objects and functions and classes, just like cout and endline and cin. And when you see the following statement using namespace std, it basically says objects like cout and endline take the declarations of these objects from the namespace std. Then question arises, why do we need iostream if we already have a namespace std? Or the other way around, why do we need namespace std if we already have iostream? As we said, iostream contains the definitions which include name and type of an object. You can imagine like name and ID of a student. On the other hand, namespaces contain the declaration, the actual blocks of code for these objects. It's like the documents of the student in the filing cabinet. Just like we need ID and name of the student and the documents of the student, we also need namespaces and iostream for our program to run successfully. I hope now you have a better understanding of what iostream and namespaces are and the difference between them.